Thoughts?
Look, Ukraine is losing this war, and they've been losing this war for some time now. Ukraine is in desperate need of Western weaponry and Western money. And the support for Ukraine is lagging in the West. So what Ukraine and their Western sponsors have been doing is launching a masterful propaganda campaign that's backed by a surge in drone activity that's designed to create the impression that Ukraine is not only standing strong, but Ukraine is seizing the initiative and putting Russia on its back feet, and that Ukraine now has a chance of winning this war. There's a summit taking place in Ankara, a NATO summit taking place in Ankara on the 7th and 8th of July. And they're going to try and follow through with commitments made at the G7 meeting that just finished to double down, to continue to fund Ukraine. And in this, you have to say the Ukrainian campaign has been masterful because they've been playing to a Western audience, and the Western audience believes that which they're being told. One of the reasons why I picked June to be this month, and it turned out to be the best decision possible. I was originally supposed to try and do this kind of trip to the SMO back in April, and for a number of reasons, it just didn't come through. And so we pushed it to June. The weather, of course, would be better, but and I thought that it would be better in terms of documenting a Russian offensive. What I got to document was the Ukrainian drone offensive. Pretty much from start to finish. And what a drone offensive it was. The Ukrainians were launching drones, having a varying degree of success, but they've never crippled Russia. That's the whole thing. When I arrived in St. Petersburg for the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which seems like it was only, a month ago, it seems like a year ago. It's amazing. So much has transpired since then. But, over 50 drones attacked St. Petersburg that morning. And they set Kronstadt on fire, and I was furious. And this comes on the heels of the May 22nd attack on Starobelsk, which murdered 21 sleeping teenager students. Zelensky was saying before I arrived that June is going to be the month. 6,000 drones are going to be moving in. The British are talking about providing, tens of thousands more, and they're just long-range sanctions. That's the new, propaganda shtick that Zelensky said. Our long-range sanctions are working, and you saw this when they hit Moscow on June 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 17th. When did I go back to June? Because I had to leave the special military operation area zone. I'll get in that second early because of the drone threat. I mean, it was a real drone threat. This isn't a game. This is real. And so when the decision was made to leave, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, return to Moscow, 500 drones hit Moscow that day. 500. Now, most of them were shot down. Only 8 got through. But you remember they hit that oil tank, and it blew up, and the lid flipped, and they got it on video, and everybody's showing it. You could see the Ukrainian defense minister showing the video, and all the European people are leaning in, smiling like, we're kicking Russia's ass now, and everybody's on social media. The Russians are scared. There's black rain falling. The Russians are worried. Well, I was in Moscow. The Russians didn't give a rat's ass. I mean, they really did. They just lived their lives. There was no panic. They went, oh, drones, shrugged it off and kept going. Because the drones are having zero existential impact on Russia. Vladimir Putin gave a very interesting interview, I think yesterday, in which he talked about this. He said, sure, there's an impact. Of course there's an impact. He said, but we've adjusted for it. We're repairing. We're moving on. And it's not having an existential threat. It's just a special military operation. We arrived in Lugansk, and we were greeted by the... I'm sorry, Maverick is entertaining me, but we were greeted by the air raid sirens. And that night, large explosions. I mean, Lugansk was under attack. We arrived in the special military operation and we were under attack. I say we, everybody. The next day we went to Starobelsk and we were literally under attack. We had to leave Starobelsk early because the Ukrainians launched 2 drones that landed a block and a half away. And it was that way the whole time. Drones everywhere. And it's only gotten worse. We got to Melitopol, and the city, the first hotel we tried to check into had no electricity and water. And we would have soldiered through that, except that they put us on like the ninth floor, and there's no elevator. And, okay, I'm willing to do this, but the hosts were like, "Yeah, we've seen you getting out of the car. You got some bad knees. You getting out of the car as Garland. It's not pretty." And they're like, "No, we're going to find you something a little bit." And they found us a hotel that had a generator and electricity and water, and only on the third floor, so it was an easier climb. But the point is, for the hundreds of thousands of people that live there, Melitopol is a city without electricity and water. You'd think you'd see demoralized people. No. People living their lives, people with good sense of humor, just going about their business. The highways are dangerous. There's no doubt about that. We had the head of our security team was also the driver, but he's sort of like a Russian version of Delta Force. I mean, cool. Scared shitless because of the drone threat. I mean, because he'd be brief, because we'd get stretches of the highway where he's like, this is, because they got their early warning mechanism. And he's like, okay, there's a high risk. You need to be scanning constantly, and you need to tell me what you see, because we might have a chance if we catch you early enough to get the car off the road and bail out of the car and live. He said, don't worry about it in front of us, because if the drone's coming at you, you don't stand a chance. It's just going to close in, hit the windshield, and you're going to die. So you got, we're scanned. But we came to a tree line. We're in the flat Zaporozhye area. We came to a tree line, and a bird like a raven came flying across the windshield out of the tree line. So you didn't see it until it actually hit your line of vision. And it looked like a drone, like one of those FPV drones. I mean, we both pooped our pants. It was like, no, not a good moment. And then on the way out, because we did have to leave, the convoy we're in got hit by Hornet drones. They got shot down, but it's a constant attack. Hornet drones, by the way, are made by Eric Schmidt's company, an American. And they use Starlink technology, and they're attacking civilians. So I just named two Americans, Eric Schmidt and Elon Musk, who are war criminals and should be identified as such and held accountable as such. But the point is, I was there. You get to Donetsk, the Donbass. There's this amazing clothing company that produces these shirts constructed under fire, built under fire. And that's their motto. They're like, bring it on. I mean, of course, nobody wants to bring it up, but they're like, bring it. We ain't going anywhere, nowhere. On the front line, the Russians are advancing. Now, there's people out there going, the Russians are only advancing, a kilometer a day, 2 kilometers a day. It's very slow advance. Well, gosh, one of the things I learned, because I went there and I got to embed with 3 drone units and got to meet some other drone operators. Drone warfare has changed the whole concept of this war. It used to be, what separated armies were the maximum effective range of their weapons, their direct fire weapons. So if they see you, they could shoot you. So you basically separate the lines. You remember World War I, the trenches? You had to get out of your trench and go across no man's land. That was called the gray zone. It's the gray zone between the red line and the blue line. Normally 1 or 2 kilometers in modern warfare. But because of drones, the gray zone is now 40 to 60 kilometers deep. That's what separates the shooters, because of the drones. So when people say the Russians are only advancing 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers, they're actually advancing 62 kilometers, because they have to go 60 miles through the gray zone to get to the Ukrainian lines to make the advance. So they're fighting through 60 kilometers of drone warfare, incessant drone warfare. And then again, the Ukrainians are flooding the zone with drones, a lot of drones, and it's very hard fighting. Every Russian I talked to was like, this is really hard. I mean, this ain't easy. But every day the Russians are advancing. So even though it ain't easy, they're doing it and they're winning. And the other thing is that the Russians, they understand that the Ukrainians have billions of dollars of technology coming in. They said it's a technology war. Drone warfare is about technology. I mean, I don't want to bore your audience too much, but the technology goes in. This isn't, these guys make their own drones, first of all, but if they buy a commercially, off-the-shelf drone, they don't take that and just fly it. They have to strip that thing down and build it back up. That's like, taking a street legal car and thinking you go drag racing. You ain't going drag racing with a street legal car. You got to rebuild the engine. You got to rebuild everything, and it's a whole new car. The drones that they go to war with are completely new drones. There's a whole bunch of technology. It's not just the way they use the radio frequencies, which was fascinating to learn about, how they can change their frequencies depending on what the enemy's doing with jamming. But now they have fiber optics. But the new thing now is cellular technology, using the internet. Basically, getting a SIM card and a SIM card equivalent. And I was looking at an experimental drone that's being put together. And if they perfect this thing, its only limitation is battery life, because it's unjammable. It'll be able to go out there and attack anything. And the Ukrainians using similar technology. Remember when they did Operation Spiderweb, when they put the trucks out there, those drones were using Russian SIM cards. They were tapping into the Russian cellular network, and that's how they were being guided, which is why now when you're in Moscow and a drone attack comes in, the internet connectivity drops to about zero because they're just shutting it all down. But, this was the new reality. But the other new reality is that the Russians, they just, first of all, they persevere. Nothing gets under their skin. They just keep going. They're really, really good at what they do. They're really, really good at what they do. They're very clever. They're very, they just think out of the box all the time. And three, they only accept one outcome, which is victory. That's the only outcome they accept. So as Ukrainians flood the zone and do what they're doing, the Russians are countering. They have a unit called Rubicon. I was supposed to interview them, but then the Russians were like, the problem is, Scott, the Ukrainians are hunting Rubicon, and they're hunting you. And we just don't want to create a situation where they get lucky and, find either one of you. So we're just going to keep you guys separated from now. But I got to talk about Rubicon. But Rubicon is a drone hunting unit. It's a specialty regiment within Russia, and they deploy drone hunting teams. So as the Ukrainians flood the zone, as they're doing right now with all these drones, take a look at what's happened the last couple of days. The Russian Ministry of Defense, every day they go, okay, the UAV command center of the 123rd Brigade is taken out with 3 to 5 FAB 500 guided bombs. And when I say taken out, that means everybody there is dead. Now understand, to train a drone operator is minimum 4 weeks. That's just to get your basic skills. But then you have to go and you have to get operational. So your good drone operator is about 6 months minimum experience under their belt as they're out there doing things. The UAV command center that is running a brigade is a fixed location, and it'll have anywhere from 10 to 20 experienced drone operators working in there. So when the Russians hit it, they kill them all. There's no survivors. They literally kill everybody. So the Ukrainians are out there flooding the zone, but every day their brigades are losing the command, and there's no one to replace them. So when you lose that brigade loses its drone support connectivity, and the Russians are just killing everybody. The Ukrainians are hunting the Russians, and every once in a while they get lucky. The Russians talk about it. You don't want to screw up. You screw up, you're dead. But the Ukrainians are screwing up. They're getting caught, and every time they replace them, they're bringing in with less experienced people. One of the talked about how they were hunting for the Ukrainians, and normally you bring in everything, and everything you bring in leaves with you. Mm-hmm. Garbage is your enemy. And so there's, and so they're drinking the water bottles, and there's a little bin that you're supposed to, put your water bottle in, to bag it up, and then you'll carry it out to leave no trace. But the average rotation through a command center is about 10 to 14 days. Once you get in there, you dig in, and you stay there until you cycle through your batteries or you cycle through your drones. And even then, they can resupply your stuff. But what happens is people get complacent. And there was a case where a Ukrainian was drinking his water bottle, and instead of getting up and putting it in the garbage, he threw it. It bounced off the lid, rolled out from underneath the tree coverage, and got exposed. And the Russians were above there with the drone going, "Gotcha!" And within minutes, boom, boom, Iskander missiles killed everybody in there. You make a mistake, you die. Right now, the Ukrainians are dying like you wouldn't believe. The information we're getting about Ukraine operations on the front line it's old. We're hearing about things that they did last week. This week, they're not doing those things because they're all dead, and the Russians are advancing. And the Russians are advancing at a more rapid pace now, because the one thing that there's two things Ukrainians use, three things to slow the Russians down. One is drones. The drones are very effective. Two is urban environment. They dig into buildings, and you got to clear them out floor by floor. And three is they fortify tree lines. It's very difficult to take a tree line out, because to go into a tree line, you're exposed to observation that the drones come in to get you. So it's constant drone suppression, constantly taking tree line after tree line and then clearing buildings. It takes time. But right now, the Russians are just in the business of just doing it. It's rapidly advancing. Now we get to the strategic thing. What happened in Kiev last night? Kiev last night was not a spur-of-the-moment decision by the Russian government. The Russian government is launching a campaign against Ukraine. I've done the kind of planning necessary to carry out this attack last night. Was a highly coordinated attack. That just people need to understand. Ukraine has the most advanced air defense systems in the world, provided by the West, and the West is constantly. So it's a layered air defense system with a lot of redundancy, a lot of capability. If the Russians just flooded the zone overnight with drones and missiles, they're going to get them shot down. And the Ukrainian air defense is always moving. So the first thing that's happened is that the Russians are constantly evaluating Kiev, looking at the defenses, and they're tracking it. And that every time they track it, they try to find the seam, or they say, okay, here's a potential gap. You know, when we went into Iraq in 1991 to begin Desert Storm, we kicked it off with Task Force Normandy. Task Force Normandy was a special operations helicopter unit that went in because the Iraqis had a radar line. And we didn't want our aircraft coming in, triggering the radar line and getting the air defenses up. So we wanted to blow a hole in the radar line that our aircraft could go through undetected. And so the Russians will do the same thing. They want to find a seam. If you take a look at the flow of missiles and drones into Kiev, you'll always see they converge on a single stream going in. That's the gap that has been blown in the Ukrainian air defense line by the Russians. But it's not something that you can do instantly. It has to be planned. It has to be constantly planned. You have assets allocated to that task. Once you identify the gap, now you bring in your weapons. You have to identify the target. Which weapon's going to hit a target? What do you expect from it? And you have to monitor the target. The Russians aren't in the business of guessing. When they hit a place, they're hitting it because there's something in there worth killing. They don't operate off of old intelligence because that's how you get Star Bells from Minab or something like that. They operate off of new intelligence. So for the Russians to carry out a package like this means that they have done the planning and all the stars aligned. And they went, boom, we got good targets, people in them, check. Air defense, gaps identified, yeah. Weapons to exploit the gap, yeah. Weapons available to hit the targets, yes. Targets verified again, go. And then they go, and it's a campaign. And the point I'm trying to make here is that this didn't happen on the spur of the moment. Vladimir Putin didn't wake up in the morning and go, all right, let's just fuck around. Let's go mess with Kiev tonight. No. This is a constantly planned event. Russia has put Kiev on notice. We're taking you out. And so what's happened is that the Russian military is constantly monitoring Kiev. And when they get the targets available, the air defense line where they want, the weapon systems up, everything good, they launch the attack. But I can guarantee you, just the way war is, that this attack that was planned was probably canceled 2 or 3 times prior to this event, meaning that they're sitting here going and the intelligence guys are monitoring. They go, like they hit a hotel, and the hotel was a place where NATO people were in. So on the verge of it, the commander's going to go, we got the target. They go, yeah, targets, and the target's hit. All of a sudden they're going to go, no, target's not there, target left. Well, we ain't launching against that target now. And so cancel, scrub, stand down, go. And I can guarantee you the Russians have done that several times because it's a moral army. That's the other thing that came across about the Russians is they're a moral army. They're a moral people. They're not out there to murder civilians. The Ukrainians are an immoral army. It's an immoral people. Eric Schmidt's Hornet drone has a feature in it. It's an AI driven. They'll fly it out as Starlink to help get it to the target, but then it goes into a racetrack mode, a hunt mode, and it uses AI. And the AI is scanning vehicles, looking for things that have been programmed into the computer. Is this what I want to attack? But when the battery life goes down, because it's all battery life driven, it clicks over into kill anything mode. And the vast majority of the targets being struck by Ukrainian Hornets are civilian targets because the drones aren't finding the military targets, or the military targets are shooting them down. They go into kill anything mode, and they'll find a car, a truck, whatever, and they dive in and they attack it. That's terrorism. And Eric Schmidt is a terrorist. But the point is the Russians have this situation under control. The drone war, this phase of it is over. Russia has won. Now Ukraine is getting ready to escalate into a different phase of it. You saw that they were using a lot of FP1, FP2 drones, those airplanes. But there's only so many you have, and the Russians have found the drone components are blowing up the warehouses with them. And so these drones are going to drop a number. That doesn't mean that they're over, but the day where they're going to cycle through 500 drones a day attacking Moscow, I think is over. They've run the course on this. They're going to go into the second phase now. They're talking about FP5s, the 2 that hit, for instance, Volgograd, hit the tractor factory that produces again, just so people understand, the factory was hit, produces mobile missile launchers. So it's a strategic facility. I mean, when you start tickling the bear, don't be surprised when the bear wakes up and bites your head off. And Ukraine's tickling the bear using intelligence and weapons provided. Those drones were built by the British, designed and built by the British using American intelligence to strike a Russian strategic target. What do you think is going to happen? The Russians said we shot down a FP-8, which is a ballistic missile. One of the things the Russians always said is the one reason why they'll never let Ukraine join NATO is that they won't allow it to become a forward operating base for NATO missiles that can reach Moscow. Well, that's exactly what's happening. That missile's not produced in Ukraine. The Motor Stitch and the other facilities that were existed in the Dnipropetrovsk and Pavlograd have been blown up. So it's produced outside of Ukraine, maybe assembled in Ukraine, and then launched using Western intelligence. How long is Russia going to put up with this? I mean, so far, Vladimir Putin is the point that he's made at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is that he puts Russia ahead, that the war will not define Russia. But as he said, there is an impact, and we are going to make adjustments. But at some point in time, logic dictates that, if the Ukrainians have this giant safe zone called Europe, where they can build, and you hear the Latvians and the Estonians brag, we're going to build a Ukrainian-Estonian drone factory on the border with Russia. I'm like, really? And how long do you think that's going to last? But the Germans right now are talking about, their Rheinmetall plant kicking into gear. Well, you think Dusseldorf's out of range of the Oreshnik? I mean, at some point in time, the risk gain benefit analysis that comes into play when you talk about hitting Europe is going to say we actually risk more not attacking Europe than we do by attacking Europe. Right now, the answer is we risk more by attacking Europe, that we can absorb this. And I just said to you, Russia won the drone war. All this crap that you've been seeing about Ukraine, it's over, ladies and gentlemen. Russia won it. It's finished. They may be a little spurt here and there, but it's like, this was the high watermark. This was Pickett's charge. The Ukrainians did the Pickett's charge, and they lost. And so, they're going to retreat now, and there's some little stay behind, but they're going to have to, replenish, come up with a new plan. But the Russians have never skipped a beat. What's going on in the front line is total Russian victory at a pace that Russia can sustain. So, it's going to be an interesting NATO meeting. This is a long way of saying I don't think that this attack today was done as a signal to anybody. This was a pre-planned attack that happened because the stars aligned. But it's going to happen again. The Russians are constantly monitoring Ukraine right now with total overwatch. And as the intelligence gathers the information, as the targets are assessed, as the weapon systems are assembled, as the air defense are broken down, the Russians will come in and hit another target and another target and another and they will never end. The Ukrainians, the best they can do is slip 2 or 3 drones through and blow up an oil tank. Looks good on, but what was more impressive, that lid flipping in the air or Kiev on fire last night? And I think the Russians made the point, we can do this all day, every day. And they will do it all day, every day.
One of the things that you were talking about is important. And that's why I feel like the trips that when you were, fortunate enough to accompany you to Russia, how I learned things that I couldn't learn any other way. There's no other way to learn it. You have to experience the culture. And one of the things I remember talking to one of our friends who was in Dubai, and he was just laughing about it. He was saying, you got to understand the Russians. He said, we're in Dubai when the war started. He says, and we're in this really nice hotel. And the drones and missiles started flying, and they came up there and they said, all right, everybody, we're going to go down and everybody's going to sleep in the basement. And he said, and like the Russians that were staying in the hotel were like, nah, we're just going back to the rooms and sleep. And then people were running around, oh my God, and the Russians the next day were like, yeah, any restaurants open, we're going to go get something to eat. And when you go to Russia and you talk to the people, you realize, people don't understand something about fights, and you understand this. Anybody who's trained in martial arts and defense understand this. It ain't always the guy that can throw the punches to win. It's the person that can take the punches. And when you talk to the Russian people, this crap about, yes, if we throw some drones at the Russians, they'll fall apart. They'll run around like mice in fear. They'll turn on it. And you look and you're like, you don't understand the Russians. You talk about a people that can take a punch. In fact, I'll go further. You just make them mad when you punch them. You just make them angry and more resolute. They have this reference point, which is World War II, the Great Patriotic War. And you can't walk 5 feet in Russia without seeing some kind of tribute to what they put up. And it's almost like there is an anger and a horror. Oh man, this is what we had to do. But there's also a pride in it that says, look what we took. We took this. We took the maximum punch, everything together. They threw everything at us. We took the punches. Well, did it hurt? Sure. But in the end, we won. And it seems to instill something into their culture that you can't get around. And that is, I don't care how, when you punch them, it only makes them angry. It only makes them more resolute. They're unshakable. And this business about we're going to throw some drones and upset the Russian people and then they'll be frightened and afraid and blah, blah, blah. They don't understand the Russian culture, and that because of their reference point, because of their pride in the great patriotic war, attacking the Russians and attacking the civilians only does the opposite and makes them angry and more resolute and more proud.